And inside relationships, this is why relationships are so hard, because it pulls out those vulnerable sides of us that we cannot show to other people if we choose not to. But inside relationships, they always come out.
Guys, welcome to the Algo-Rhythm of Love episode. We have got something really exciting for you today. Last month, you'll remember that we did an entire session about healing before dating. And part of what we learned in that session was doing some framework to help set yourself up to heal before your next date. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, Jason.
Our guest today is Michelle Parker, a licensed professional counselor with a Master of Arts in Marriage and Family Therapy. From Atlanta Wellness Collective, located in Ackworth, Georgia, Michelle specializes in marital, premarital, and relationship counseling for both couples as well as individuals. Michelle, welcome to the Algo-Rhythm of Love podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Jason. This is a super important topic. And one of the things that we discussed with you, Michelle, before we decided what we were going to talk about today is something that I read on your website. And that statement was, none of us are born knowing how to be the perfect partner. Mm-hmm. All of us have past stuff, right? Traumas. And that is really what we're going to dive into today. So something that you said as we were preparing stuck with me, you don't approach the term attachment styles, which is our topic for today, by the way that social media does. You look beneath what that label is, or whatever that driving factor is that relates to what that label is, or really that behavior that person is experiencing.
Well, before we go there, I think that we should at least give a quick overview of attachment styles for those of you who may not be familiar with it. And this is something that you see bits and pieces of all over social media, and a lot of people have an idea about it. But it's these 4 different attachment styles, which are secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. But, that really only kind of scratches the surface of what this is really all about. So, Michelle, you have a different take. Tell us what your take is on the subject of attachment styles.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, guys. I wanted to go back first to something that Amber had said. The reason why I do this job is because so much of what you guys just said was my life. Right. I didn't understand what I was doing wrong in my marriage, and I ended a marriage that was 23 years long and divorced because of so much of what you guys are talking about. Mm-hmm. And why I'm passionate about what I do, and honestly, why I do what I do, was born from the fact that I did it wrong. I didn't understand. And I realized most people don't understand. Most people aren't doing the work. This is not a class that's taught. It desperately needs to be included in our kids' education. People don't know how to communicate. They don't understand their own emotions. They don't understand how their body is talking to them and what their brain might be saying, and all these functions that people come in and they feel so much shame over what is going on inside of them, and they don't know how to articulate that. They don't know what it means for their relationship. So after my divorce, I went back to school. This is what I wanted to do way back. It never happened. I instead stayed home with my 4 kids, which I'm so thankful that I did. I homeschooled them and did hybrid school with them for 20 years. And I'm so grateful. But after that, everything fell apart. And I really wanted to put the pieces back together of why did that fall apart? We're 2 quote unquote good people who had the best of intentions, who wanted to do this right. And if we can mess it up, everybody else is probably feeling the same thing. And so that was really my intention of going back to school and becoming an LPC. And I wanted to specialize in marriage because people need to understand that, number 1, they're not crazy. Number 2, this isn't obvious. Right. And we have to really understand so much under the surface. So attachment style is a giant piece of the puzzle, but there are other pieces. Right. And from my framework, what I do in session is, I'm going to assess your family of origin. I'm going to assess your communication style. I'm going to assess how you fight. How do you fight? And when you fight, And when you fight, what happens? What happens when you fight? Do you fight well? Do you not fight well? People don't want to talk about that.
Right.
Talk about your intimacy life. So many
Right.
people don't. And all of this impacts how people show up for relationship.
Yeah.
So yes, attachment is a big piece of it. But if we don't understand all the pieces that are touching attachment, then we're going to miss the full picture. Attachment is awesome. And there's
Right.
so many, I learn a lot from studying attachment. But from where I sit working with couples every day, there's so much more. And if we don't make sure that we're paying attention to those pieces, we're going to miss some foundational things that whether we understand our attachment or not, it's not going to help us if we don't
Sure.
understand the rest.
So it sounds to me like you are peeling back the attachment style and looking underneath that.
We want relationships to be safe.
Right.
We want to be able to show up in a safe relationship. But I think we've got to take it a step further. We've also got to be safe enough in ourselves to be able to show up when things get uncomfortable. And I think that's the piece that a lot of people miss when they study, one specific thing and then they say, oh, well, that person's not safe. When I say safe, I mean emotionally safe inside
Right.
relationships. So I want to be able to show up to my relationship, and it's not a requirement that they do all of the work. I've got to do my part of the work as well. And so in order to do that, I have to be uncomfortable sometimes. And I think people think if I've got to be uncomfortable or if this makes me pull back, that something must be wrong.
Sure.
And that's not always the case. We can show up and be uncomfortable. And that's a lot of what I do in my sessions. I make couples uncomfortable on purpose because I want to see what comes out. I want to see what they hide. I want to see what it is that is tripping them up when they're at home in their comfortable place, because people, they become a different version of themselves when they're inside their home. Like, we know this. We show up differently to work.
Right.
We shouldn't, but sometimes it's much easier to let our emotions flow, to put up our walls or to stonewall at home. We have to be able to be uncomfortable in those situations and lean in instead of checking out and saying, hey, I noticed that this happened. Can we talk about it? What does that really mean? What did you want to say that you couldn't say? And so that's kind of what I do in my office is like, all right, let's break that apart and figure out what did you guys need to get to the next step? Does that make sense?
Sounds like some self-awareness discussions we had, doesn't it?
It does.
Right,
And this is a hot topic with me, is this idea that what you said dovetails into the question of how often do so many of us get caught up in our own heads and trapped in our own perspective, and we have this cognitive dissonance or cognitive fusion or solipsistic outlook where we just assume that whatever we think and we feel has to be right. My attitude and my outlook is right because it's mine, right? And we don't stop to look around and inspect our own attitudes and our own beliefs, and that then leads into, okay, well, if I'm unhappy and I'm discontent, it's everybody else's problem. And a lot of times we need to say, like to your point, what am I doing differently, or what do I need to do differently?
Yeah.
So let's say that somebody reads an article or watches a TikTok, they take a quiz, and they find out that they're anxious attached. Okay, so they have a little bit of knowledge now, but it's not a full picture, and it's pop culture psychology, right? So it's a dangerous situation. You hear the phrase all the time, I know just enough to be dangerous. So speak to why people should not just put a whole lot of faith in some online quiz that they take, and really should dig a lot deeper into figuring out what it is, where they're coming from, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, you want to ask the question, how can I grow? And you want to ask that question for the rest of your life, because there's never a point where I'm done growing. And inside relationships, this is why relationships are so hard, because it pulls out those vulnerable sides of us that we cannot show to other people if we choose not to. But inside relationships, they always come out. So you want to ask, how can I grow, rather than the statement, well, this is just how I am.
Yeah.
Because inside relationships, you're never going to find someone who has exactly all the things that you have.
Right.
So if we're going to do this well, I have to understand my partner's flaws, triggers, wounds, like the way that he communicates, what he needs, like what his fears are telling him. And he's got to understand mine. But the irony here is that people want to avoid this.
Yeah.
But when you avoid it, you don't get to connect.
Sure.
Right.
If I say to my partner, okay, it's scary when you shut down, that scares me. I learn about me and I learn about him.
Right.
Keep going deeper. I'm vulnerable about what scares me, which gives him the opportunity to come toward me and
Yeah.
keep me safer in that.
Yeah.
You see what just happened? I became vulnerable. I was honest with him. It gave
Sure.
him an opportunity to come toward me. And now we're in a better place,
Yeah.
even though we both did something uncomfortable.
I love
And
that.
that's powerful because I want to make sure that this is the atmosphere that I'm creating in my relationship. Now that's really hard. There's a lot of work that has to happen to
Right.
get us to this point. I have to be secure enough in myself. I have to be
Right.
aware enough in myself to be able to say, hey, I noticed that and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Can we talk about it? And I have to say it nicely.
Right.
I
Yes.
because I can, I can say whatever I need to say
Right.
kindly if I
Sure.
do my work.
Right.
And that's the point.
Right.
I can have wounds. I can have fears that mess with how I respond. I can be angry,
Mhm.
right? But if I don't understand what is going on inside of me, I'm going to project that onto my husband. I am going to be angry at him instead of explaining to him how I feel.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
very different. You see how anger was still present, but I was able to understand what was going on inside of me and then use that as information,
Yeah.
not as an attack.
And one of the things that you said a few minutes ago is not being able to be afraid to be uncomfortable. And I think sometimes when we're
Mhm.
doing individual therapy
Mhm.
or when we're doing couples therapy, we can get uncomfortable. So we eliminate things that make us uncomfortable. And you also just said something about whatever you do or however I react to this, it may be a trigger, right? But it's how I handle that trigger. And one of the things that you and I talked about before this session began is for people that are on the other side of maybe marriage counseling and couples counseling, you said it's very important for people to show up and tell the real truth. And sometimes when I'm in therapy or when Jason's in therapy or whoever is in therapy, they may be telling one side of that story. So why is it important
Yeah.
when you work with someone and you start peeling back these layers
Yeah.
that someone is really honest? And what do you find when you really start digging deep with someone?
Yeah, I love this question because I see a lot of couples, but I also see a lot of individuals who come in to work on their marriage, but they're coming in alone.
Right.
And the problem with that is I only get one perspective, right? And I mean, almost without fail, whenever I've had an individual come in for marriage work and I invite the partner in for maybe, just one collateral session,
Neat.
I always learn so much.
I bet.
And usually if I would have known that earlier,
Mhm.
I would have directed therapy in a different way. And so one of the most important questions you can ask yourself or dive deep with your therapist is, what am I missing about me? So much of what comes out in an individual session is people will be talking to me about maybe an argument or something that they're frustrated about with their spouse. And they don't have the self awareness to give me the piece that's their part. And so I don't have that.
Right.
And so I'm helping them, directing them, asking them questions, being curious with them, but I don't have all the information. So we
Sure.
might end up in a direction that isn't helpful for them because a
Right.
giant piece would have made us go the other
Right.
direction.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's why it's so important when I have couples in a session, because I always pause the one partner and get the other one's perspective, because
Right.
it's so important even in that moment to show them, do you see how y'all saw this differently?
Mhm.
Let's talk about that.
Neat.
And when I do that and we go underneath the surface with something where I've caught them in that's not what I said. That's not what I meant. You heard this wrong.
Mhm.
What we find is always something that'll break your heart. It's not that my
Wow.
husband rejected me. It's that he was trying to protect the relationship. He didn't want us to fight, so he stopped talking.
Oh, wow.
Wife may have felt like he rejects me every time.
Wow.
He doesn't care about what I feel. And if I go to the husband, they'll look at me like, no, 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 that's not at all what I was trying to do. I was trying to protect her, because if I would have engaged, it always turns into a fight. So I teach these couples then, all right, perfect. That's great data for you. Now let's prove it. Let's prove it. Let's do the work so that you guys can show up. And we're actually having a conversation that is real, not just perceived by each person, which then is interpreted the wrong way.
That really, really strikes a chord with me, because that was my exact situation in my marriage.
Really?
My ex-wife started going to therapy, therapy, and it was her going. And at first, I offered to go, and the psychiatrist didn't want to see me. He wanted me to go to one of his colleagues. Well, 6 months in, he brings me in for the exact reason of what you're talking about, and it turns out that. And then I was released from the therapy. So the main problem that was going on, these undiagnosed issues, that was discovered because I was brought in to hold her accountable, because something you said, or it might have been you said, if you're not honest in therapy,
Right.
why are you there?
Sure.
If you're not telling the truth, then you're not, the outcome you get is going to be misaligned.
Right.
It doesn't work.
So, Jason, to your point, yes, sometimes people intentionally don't share. Sometimes they don't know.
Right.
Sometimes they don't know how they're coming across. I will have women who sit here and tell me, like, I tried to be not kind to him, or I try to say this and he doesn't listen. And then 6 steps later, I'm yelling, and all husband will hear is the yelling, right? He is not aware of the tender parts that happened before.
Right.
Or some
Yeah.
people come in and they have no idea how they are perceived by their partner. I've had people say, well, she is scary when she gets mad. And she will look at me and go, how am I scary? I don't know that I'm scary.
Right.
So some of it, yes, some of it is people. And to speak to that, sometimes people a year in will say, I was afraid to tell you this.
Yeah.
And that is heartbreaking as well. But so often it's, I didn't know that that's how you perceived me. Because people aren't having these conversations. The husband isn't saying, hey, I get scared when you react that way, and it makes me not want to bring something to you. So I stop talking to you. You see how then that's their trail.
Yeah.
That's their relationship.
Right.
All because we didn't have a hard conversation in the beginning where the husband said, hey, you're kind of aggressive with me. And she was humble enough to say, I don't want to be aggressive with you. Let me figure that out. Why am I aggressive with you? Okay, well, there might be communication issues. She might be saying this 17 times and he might not be hearing it.
Yeah.
And I hear that a lot.
Sure.
But then she thinks, well, he's intentionally doing that. And he's like, I am not intentionally doing that. I've got 17 balls in the air. And
Right.
it's never that I'm intentionally doing that. But having a conversation about that can fix everything, because the wife then goes, oh, I do matter.
Right.
He's just busy. He's got a lot in his head, on his mind. How
Right.
can I help him with that? And then he goes, she's not being rude and crass to me. She's just exhausted, and she's told me 7 times. And so that's my approach. I want to get to the heart, because
Sure.
Right.
without question, I maybe can think of one couple where this wasn't the case. What is going on under the surface is 2 people just trying to reach for each other, and they don't know how to do it, and they're afraid, so they don't, or they're too aggressive, and so it
Right.
doesn't get received, or we have wounds or family of origin stuff that messes with us and we aren't showing up. And it's hard to recognize that in yourself, which is why it's so important to have someone else be like, hold on, here's
No,
what
I
I'm
think that's
seeing
fabulous.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because most of our listeners, let's be honest, are on the other side of that. And maybe they went through that and did therapy prior to ending their last relationship or their marriage. But sometimes,
I think that it's key for everybody to try to always consider other perspectives and also turn the microscope on ourselves, because when we get that to your point exactly, if you don't do that, then you just get caught up in we get caught up in what our perspective is, right? And so it's important. And I'll tell you, from a man's perspective, once a man is vulnerable with a woman and that is ever turned against him and is used as ammunition,
Right.
people have to understand that men are more or less generally raised, reared, brought up to be stiff upper lip. You don't show emotion, it's weakness. And when a man takes a chance to be vulnerable with a woman, and then that is ever used against him later,
Yeah.
he's not going to do that very many more times
Yeah.
before you get the silence like what you were talking about. And so I think it's important that, you know, if you're the wife or the girlfriend or whichever position you're in, if you are vulnerable and make it okay for him to tell you how he's feeling, then that will make him a lot more willing to do it. But the most important thing is don't turn around and use that to win an argument tomorrow about something unrelated, because you just shut the door on that vulnerability forever.
I think it's a great point. You're so right. And I do a lot of work with individual men. And after session one, when we talk about all of these functions that are under the surface, they are hooked. I don't know that I've ever had an individual man client not tell me, this is fascinating. I need to know more. I'm
Yes.
finally understanding what's going on. And it's heavy male because to your point, society says, okay, your job is to fix things. Your job is to provide. Your job is to not have emotions. And a lot of the way people were raised and the way the world teaches men is
Yes.
this is how you're supposed to be. That doesn't work inside relationships, and it makes the woman feel masculine. So then she becomes masculine, which does what? It emasculates the man.
Yes.
We have to, and this is pivotal. We have to let men do what they're really good at and women do what they're really good at. And it works really well together.
It absolutely does.
It does. And what I tell all my couples is the thing that sets people apart, couples that will work and couples that won't work, I find it's willingness. Are you willing to have the uncomfortable conversations? Are you willing to walk with me through this, even though it's scary? Can we mess it up and start over? Can we get it wrong and apologize? Can I come to you and say, I really messed that up? I have to do that, right?
Right.
I have to do that. Well, what does that do? It creates this atmosphere that you're talking about. Men, I'm a girl's girl. I root for my girls. But I'm going to tell you, I have such a heart for men because y'all are in the worst possible position. You're expected to do all these things, but then we don't make the atmosphere atmosphere
conducive. Yes.
to that. And so our job, we each have a job. Men have a job, women have a job.
Right.
Mhm.
Men's job, protect us. Be a container for our emotions. Don't be afraid of our emotions. Here's the caveat. You can't do that if I don't understand myself and I don't come to you with respect. That doesn't mean I can just lay into you. That means I have to learn me. That means I have to apologize when I don't do it well. That means I can't be scary to you.
Right.
I have to do my work so that you can do your work. And if we have willingness, we can have these conversations and they can be powerful. They are powerful. Some of the most beautiful moments that I see in this room is when people come to each other humbly. That's what creates connection. So we don't want to be afraid of conflict. We don't want to be afraid of being different. We absolutely want our men to open up to us, but it's also our job to help them with that. Like co-regulation says, we do this together.
Right.
I'm going to notice what you need. You're going to notice what I need. And if we do this well, that's when relationships are so powerful and they're so beautiful. But we both have to be willing. And what I would tell you in those moments when the man, or if I'm talking to a couple, when the man doesn't feel comfortable opening up, that's a relationship problem. He needs to make sure that he's done his work. Like there's always that part, right? And let's do that work. Let's uncover that. But God, what relationships across the board are missing this massive piece where men can come to the table in ways they don't think they can. Every single man that I work with, I'm like, oh my gosh, like another and more data for men who have heart, men who think about things, but men who aren't communicating those things because they don't feel like they can. And it's their job to understand what's preventing that inside them, but it's our job as the wife to make the atmosphere conducive to that. It's powerful. That's why relationships have so many moving parts. We have our responsibility. If you're getting into a relationship, you have to assume I'm going to help this person. They're going to help me. But we have to do it with respect. We have to do it with humility. We have to admit our mistakes, and we have to be willing to do the work.
Sure. Yeah. I love what you said, because I do think that we often see and experience the us versus them with the women and the men. And you talked a little bit about co-regulation. I love that you are a girl's girl and that you have a soft spot for men. And Jason does a lot of work with men in midlife who are on the other side of this. Can you talk a little bit about when we're not co-regulating and when these patterns and habits, how does that quietly self-sabotage you when you get into the next relationship or have that next date, or even in those early intro messages before things even get started?
Yeah, for people who have come out of a long-term relationship or a marriage who are now looking at being single
Right.
for maybe the first time in a long time, and so how does that differ for people who are trying to, instead of being in the marriage or the relationship and trying to make that work? Let's take that, and one of the things that I say to people is that when you have a relationship that ends, not all is lost, because any enjoyment, any contentment, any good memories, all of the good things that happen are still there. And you take that, and then if you're a conscientious person who wants to grow and wants to improve yourself, I think it's important that, and I'm going to talk about radical accountability. We have to say, what did I do wrong?
Yes.
What could I have done better? What did I learn about me? And if you have the ability to say, okay, the lessons that I learned and the things that I could have done better, the ways that I could have been better, has nothing to do with the other person. And I can learn things about myself, and I can try to correct those going forward and try to grow, and not just, people who can learn to be radically accountable for their own lives have a fantastic shot at life, love, success, all of those things. And if you never take accountability for yourself, being accountable gives you the power to change it. If everything that happens or doesn't happen is somebody else's fault, then you are not in control of your own life. And so coming out of a relationship when you may be saying, asking all these questions, speak to the difference in that and being in the marriage and saying, okay, this is over now, but I still have lessons I can carry forward from this. I still learn things about people, this other person, and about myself that I want more of, as well as things I don't want more of. So coming out of the dating or the ending the marriage, how do people deal with that?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. So, what I find, I do work with couples that have been together decades.
Yeah.
And the problem is they chose their partner based on wounds that they were trying to address from childhood. Well, then you add decades to their life, and maybe one of them grew, one of them didn't. Maybe they both grew, but they grew in different directions. And all of a sudden they're looking back going, why did I choose this person?
Yes.
We can't choose someone based on our wounds. We have to choose some, we have to do the work within ourselves so that when we're choosing someone, it's not to make us better. It is to further connection. It is to build something bigger than both of us, because we do take our wounds into the next relationship, and we have to be able to say, okay, I understand where I messed up. But so many people, to your point, they don't look back on their relationship and go, let me learn something about myself. It's all, let me tell you all that they did.
It never occurs to so many people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so I'll give you an example. Like, a lot of times when couples come in and they have an argument, I have them sort of rehash the argument in front of me, because I want to show them how the same argument can be perceived differently from each person. And that's kind of what you're speaking to, just in general in life. And it blows their mind, because we could take a tone, we could take a verbiage, we could take a memory from something, and all of a sudden there are two different conversations happening. The husband is arguing for one thing, the wife is arguing for another, and they can't see the fact that they're not talking about the same thing.
Right.
And that's exactly how we live our life. But the cure is having hard conversations. Like, this didn't go well. Let's talk about why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sounds kind of like intentional awareness. Sometimes we say something about perception versus reality. My perception of what happened in that argument,
Yeah.
it may be very different than the other person's perception. And I think that awareness is really, really, really what is the key, is
Yeah.
being able to be aware. So what does it look like when someone's emotions are driving an interaction or a fight? What does that look like when we're not aware of how we come across? That same scenario where you just talked about the two couple, when your emotions are in the driver's seat, how does that work and what does that look like?
Okay. So I feel like this is something that I it's funny that you use the term driving, because I use this analogy a lot.
Mhm.
I tell clients, imagine that your brain is a car, and inside that car, your emotions travel with you all day, every day. They are always in the car with you. All of them, the bad ones, the good ones are all in the car.
Mm.
Our brain, we get to decide which emotion drives. People don't know this. Never let anger drive, never let anxiety drive, right? We get to decide who drives.
Yeah.
But I have to know myself well enough to know when anxiety is like climbing from the back seat into the front seat and sitting in the passenger seat. I have to be able to recognize what that feels like. For me, anger I have to put in the trunk, because anger jumps in the driver's seat for me
Oh
so
boy.
fast. Sometimes I don't recognize it, right? And so the work is, who tries to drive my car and why? Why does anger try to drive my car? Now, there's data there and there's so much work underneath that. But as an umbrella statement, we've got to understand that we have the power to control that. And it all comes down to slowing things down so that we recognize when the shift starts happening. I have to do my work so that I recognize when anger tries to jump in the front seat. And I know what that feels like. My body tells me when anger is coming from the back seat to the front seat. Now, if I'm not aware of my body, I'm not going to notice that. People don't understand somatics. They don't understand that your body will feel something before your brain recognizes it. It's fascinating. So people are not living integrated lives. Their brains and their bodies aren't connected in a way that's helpful. So we
I'm
have to do the
fascinated.
work. It's powerful though, because if you understand I have the control always of the steering wheel, I never am I'm not giving that power. To your point, I'm not giving that power to anybody else. The steering wheel's mine.
Wow.
Anger might be telling me, hey, you should be mad about that, but I'm still driving. And I get to decide how that affects how I drive.
Yes,
Isn't that
and
powerful? Yeah.
it is very powerful. And this has been a thing that I've been dealing with lately. And it's beginning to recognize, like what you say, when you start to sense that anger is coming out of that back seat, that is the first thing. Because if you don't recognize it, next thing you know, you've just gone into that mode, right? And I have a Hulk mode in me that comes out. I like to say
Yes, you do.
I have a long fuse, but you don't want to reach the end of it. And I've had some things happen lately where I would have a year ago even responded very differently, but I'm able to sense that coming on, and then it gives me just a moment to choose.
Yep.
I can choose to go down that path or not. Somebody said something incredibly rude to me on the internet yesterday. My first thought was I'm going to tear them a new one. Then I decided I'm not going to respond at all. And you know what I ended up doing? And this is, I'm proud because this is growth for me. I said, I don't know what's going on, but I hope things are okay and your day gets better.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh,
I don't know where that came from, but
I
it
was
came
wondering
from
where it came
something.
from.
I don't know where that came from, but you know exactly that. It's being able. It's noticing these changes happening and how you. What was the guy's name? Anytime somebody says something or does something, if you'll just take a pause,
yep.
and that is, I think, the first step to not reacting. That's the first step to responding. But again, the theme that keeps coming back is introspection, stopping and assessing yourself, thinking about things. Don't just react,
Mhm.
Yeah.
think. Look, learn.
Everything is so chaotic in life. We can't do anything and not do it at 100 miles an hour. And if you let your body operate the way that it wants to operate, it's not going to function well.
Sure.
That's
I
right.
can concur with
What
that.
was
Yeah.
the body tells the tale, or the body shows the trauma? I don't remember
Keeps the
what
score.
keeps the score. Yeah, I knew it was. I knew it was a body
You're
and
on the right
something.
trail.
Yeah,
Definitely keeps the
it
score.
definitely does. And I've had 4 back surgeries, and let me tell you, when I start getting stressed or anxious, I feel it.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that happens. That your body tells you.
Well, it's fascinating. And, if you were my client and you just said that in a session, what I would tell you is, all right, when you feel anxious, do you know where your body tells you that you're anxious? Because the more that I know, then I'm going to notice the feeling, and you have more control because you notice it earlier, because remember, your body recognizes it a little bit faster than your brain.
Right.
So if, like, for me, when my gut starts doing this, I know I have to pay attention. I know something has happened. And it's crazy if you'll do this work, because now I've practiced it so much that when my gut does that, sometimes I don't even know what I'm upset about, even though my body tells me I'm upset. And what that does for me, because I'm reactionary, I react very quickly too. But what it does for me is it's my safety valve. I go, okay, something is about to get me upset. But I've noticed it. I can slow myself down, and I can implement the tools that help me assess what's going on, know what I can do that's healthy, and understand the data rather than just react.
Yeah.
And just so we can just listen and be aware of the clues that our body is sending us, instead of just wide open toward, what hell and damnation.
Yes. Yeah. It's so interesting because when I talk to men, it's crazy because they always will say, I feel just the heaviness on my chest, or they'll even say, I feel like my throat is closing up. Think about that.
Yeah.
My heart wants to express, my throat wants to speak, and I can't.
Yeah.
You see how it's all connected and it's all powerful.
Very.
And the more that I understand that about my partner, like, golly, my compassion just grew, because if I'm thinking about my partner and thinking, well, every time that happens, he's feeling like someone's sitting on his heart. I don't want that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't know that if I didn't ask, if I didn't have the hard conversations.
Yeah.
I would assume something based on my wounds. I would assume, well, he just doesn't care about me.
Sure.
That's not true.
Right.
Why am I thinking that? Well, I'm thinking that because that's my fear.
Mm-hmm.
And what your brain does is, if it fears something, it's going to look for proof that that's true. And until we tell it something different.
Right.
Confirmation bias.
Yes,
Yeah,
until we tell it something different. So if we're not having the hard conversations, we're missing this giant piece, because so often couples will come in and the wife will be like, I have lots and lots of proof that he doesn't care about me. And then when we uncover it, I'm like, that's actually no proof, because he's doing this and he's doing this and he's doing this. And she's like, no, she's not seeing it.
It's a narrative.
It's a narrative. It's a story. It's a story that we tell ourselves. And until I asked my husband, like, hey, that felt like you were abandoning me. Can we talk about that? Oh my gosh, sweetie, I would never do that to you. Can I explain to you what was going on for me? And every single time I've done this, what I learn makes me fall more in love.
I think that going back to this awareness situation, you're talking a lot about people that have gone through this and have done this work. And one of the things that we find a lot of is that people are not aware, and people are just firing off in a group chat, or, on a thread, or in their dating profile, even with that unhealthy version of themselves. Not like what Jason just said, where he took a minute, paused, and addressed the situation in a way that he became aware of what was happening.
Right.
I am seeing so much of the time. I pay attention a lot with women, a lot with men too, especially in our singles group, where people are firing off in the unhealed version of themselves, or the version of themselves that didn't go through therapy, and they are self-sabotaging the chance that they have in being able to get to know someone new, because you're just turning people off, but you're not even aware that you're doing it.
Yeah.
And so many of these people will become jaded after one bad date, one rejection, and I'm going, you haven't even put in nearly enough time to feel that way yet.
Right. Yeah. What did we hear this week? What's even the point of?
What is, yeah, nobody will call you back. Everybody ghosts you. Nobody wants to. So why are you why are you trying to date?
Right,
If you really believe that,
Mm.
then what, why are you out? If you think it's a lost cause, then why are you wasting your time on it?
Yeah, it is a very important, I think, for you to, whether it's an attachment style or it's a wound or it's something that you've carried over from your past relationship, your marriage, or even your childhood, what we were talking about earlier, that you do the work to become intentional and aware. And if we don't do that, then we can probably expect, Michelle, that the same thing is going to happen again in our next relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. If you're not, to back to the original question, we're talking about, people popping off and that showing up again in future relationships. If people don't do the work or people aren't educated, they're not realizing that some of these reactions are your brain's way of protecting you. And while the reaction feels real and while the reaction comes out a lot, so it might not feel like it's something I need to pay attention to, this is just who I am. Sometimes it's dysregulation. And I know we're going to get to that in a minute, but it's essentially your brain will set off an alarm if something feels dangerous, and it triggers a different part of your brain. So you're actually reacting from a different part of your brain, the brain that says, hey, a lion's chasing you, run.
Mhm.
So if a lion's chasing you, what are you not worried about? You're not worried about anything other than escaping the danger. And that's how people, they react from that.
Right.
And if they have not done the inner work, if they're not understanding themselves on a deeper level, they don't know the difference between, okay, this is the version of me that is scared in some way versus this is the version of me that isn't scared some way. I like to give the analogy of, like, let's say I adopt an abused dog, and the dog was abused. It was hit with a broom before I got it. I adopt the dog. The dog's in my living room. I go to sweep my kitchen. What happens?
It's triggered.
The dog is still going to be afraid,
Sure.
even though it's in a safe environment.
Right.
You see, we have to understand that your brain registers that very differently. And if we aren't aware of it, it will feel like it takes over in some scenarios when we're, on a dating app or, in a social media thread or whatever. And I see that so often. It's what happens in conflict. It's why it's so important to slow conflict down and make sure that we have conflict when we're not triggered, so that we are talking from the healthy part of our brain, the part of our brain that can assess logic and reasoning and can hear clearly, that isn't running from a lion.
The lizard brain will trump the prefrontal cortex every single time.
Yes, it will.
For our listeners who are hearing this and saying, maybe that's me. Maybe I need to turn the microscope on myself a little bit. Maybe I need to assess how I'm viewing things, how I'm seeing things. How does somebody begin that journey? If you've just been lost in, he did this, she did that, it's the world's fault. What's the first step for somebody to start to try to look at themselves a little bit? Because at the end of the day, what we think and feel and how we react and respond is the only thing we're in control of.
Right.
So how do we go from blaming everybody and being jaded and being bitter to, okay, let's see how I can actually make this better?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it's really tricky because I'm the only one that's inside me. So I'm the only one that has the benefit of what I think and what I feel. And all of this is normal to me. All of that's normal to you. All of this is normal to you.
Yeah.
It's so hard to turn the lens on yourself. Like I tell my husband all the time, it's really hard for me to analyze our marriage because I'm a piece of it. I can analyze someone else's marriage all day long and nail it. When I come home and he's like, hey, analyze this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so hard for me to separate me from therapist. It takes intentionality. It takes awareness. It takes slowing down. It takes turning the lens on yourself and asking yourself, okay, when something goes left, am I going to ask myself, what was my intention here? What was my expectation here? What was I afraid of? What was I wanting that I didn't get? What did this touch wound wise in me? Am I aware of what I'm feeling day in and day out, because those feelings drive our behaviors, right? So if I'm not aware of it, that's the thing. You have to slow everything down and ask yourself these questions, because until you start recognizing, oh, that was anxiety trying to drive, or oh, that was anger trying to drive, I have to be more aware of myself in all the different scenarios. And so often when we get triggered, or when we are in conflict, which are these are the situations where people need help.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
aren't becoming self-aware. We're not asking ourselves the question because it's embarrassing. Like if I'm going back over an argument, like I don't want to look at the part where I was wrong. I just want to look at the part where they were wrong, because that keeps me safe, right? And that's what I want to focus on, and that's where I want the attention to be. But in healthy relationships, we have to look at both sides. And in order to do that, I have to be brave enough to look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, what was really going on for me?
Yeah.
And so often, like, we've had situations where I've said to my husband, like, hey, I think something else might have been driving that emotion there. Can we talk about it? And again, going back to willingness. If you're willing, it's not threatening to talk to your spouse if they come at you kindly and respectfully. If you can find willingness, you can undo most everything. Not everything, but a lot of the problems that I see are slowly undone with willingness to address. And that's why it's so helpful inside relationships. You've got one partner that can say, hey, I see this. Do you see this?
Yeah.
I need my husband to tell me. Like sometimes he'll be like, hey, you're anxious today. And I'm like, am I? I didn't notice that yet.
Yeah.
Co-regulation says
Yeah.
my partner can notice it before me. And how great is that? If that's
Yes.
what we create, then I've got a safeguard. Like I've got somebody that has my back. And I can't look at that as an attack. Now he has to do it kindly,
Sure.
right? He can't be rude about it. But if he isn't, all that does is make me feel more safe.
And all of the people that say, I don't need anybody, I don't want anybody, like these are the things that you get. A lot of women, I don't need a man's money, I'm independent, all that. Yeah, but all of this synergy that you get where you're helping each other and you're seeing the blind spots, or the other person's seeing the blind spots that you have that you can't see. That's where you're supposed to, be mutually beneficial.
Right.
And there's going to be days where you just don't feel like dealing with it.
Yeah.
It's okay because he's got it.
Yeah.
And there's other days where you got it and he doesn't.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of a relationship.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
I think that you both just totally said something that I want to kind of hone in on, because we see a lot of people that are not necessarily self-aware. And you said you have to turn the lens on yourself. And when we're single, when we're that version that Jason just described, we do not have the co-regulation unless we have a girlfriend or a parent or even a child that gives us some of that introspection that we may be triggered, volatile, unhinged, or whatever. We are not in our singleness going to likely change if we're not doing therapy. So with you saying, turn the lens on yourself, how can a single person in their singleness, on the other side of whatever they've gone through, turn the lens on themselves? What are those first steps for that puppy that was, hurt by that broom? What's the first step to turning the lens on yourself?
Going back to dysregulation, it's really understanding, are we thinking clearly or are we not? And we can't make decisions when we aren't thinking clearly. We can't have reactions and responses if we're not thinking clearly. And so the first thing that I do with couples, generally speaking, is, are we regulated?
Yeah.
Can we understand who I am when I'm regulated versus who I am when I'm not regulated? And so many people, there's not education on this.
Sure.
People don't understand. I can't do anything with couples until they can keep themselves calm. Sometimes when people consistently are dysregulated, they might not even recognize it. So it goes back to self-awareness. But until we understand the difference between the version of me that is dysregulated and the version of me that isn't, you aren't going to do anything healthy. That's really the first step, is how do I regulate? And there are people that stay in dysregulation for long periods of time and they don't know it. And so then they start feeling shame, or they start feeling anger, or they start withdrawing from the world, and they don't understand what's going on. And it's pitiful. And you can't imagine what hope is given to people when you look at them and say, it sounds like there's something else going on. It might be a medical need. It might be a hormone, just, a hormone issue. It might be something that got triggered and is unprocessed, or maybe you're grieving. You don't realize that you're still grieving something, and how these emotions show up, because those emotions all make something happen. Like our brain is saying, okay, that emotion is data. What do I have to do with that? And I have to be self-aware enough to be able to say, am I regulated or am I not regulated? And there's lots of things that you can do that help you regulate. If for men or for women, for everybody, lifting heavy weights helps your body regulate. Drinking a glass of cold water, going for a walk, standing in the grass with your bare feet. It's, sometimes eating something sour, just like it can take you from dysregulating that part of your brain being activated to slowly activating different parts of your brain so that you can think clearly. But that's absolutely number one, is, are you regulated? Make sure you're regulated before you do anything.
Yeah. Sounds like no matter what attachment style you identify with, you can call yourself avoidant or anxious or whatever, but if you're not regulated, then
Right.
something's got to give, or else we're going to keep doing the same thing over and over.
Right. You're going to be giving people the unhealed version of you. Right. And is it unhealed or is it triggered? Right. There's argument there.
One of the places that I think that that we see this show up so much, and talking to people and being in the singles world, a single adult dating world, is that this idea that, or not idea, the situation is that I see so often is how a grown man or a grown woman can absolutely hang their hour, their day, their week, their month on whether some stranger on the internet returns their text in a timely manner, whether they get a reply, whether they don't get a second date, all of these things that people just and then they don't understand when they come across as needy and thirsty and pitiful and all of these things, that instantly kills attraction.
Right.
And that I have a saying that I think I came up with, and it's, don't date to make your life better. Make your life better to date, right? And
I love it.
I am absolutely convinced that the more a person concentrates on self-growth and improvement and building the life you want, regardless of your relationship status, when you worry less about finding somebody else to validate you or to fill a hole in you or to give you whatever it is that you haven't found yet, the more you work toward those goals that are worthy for you as a single person or as somebody in a relationship, everything in your life continues to improve, and the dating it's a non-issue. It's if you fix the big things in your life, right? If you're not self-reflective, you're not self-aware, and you try to work toward that, your career is going to get better. Your romantic relationships are going to get better. All of it, it's all improvement. Any effort and work you put into yourself pays dividends across every area of your life.
Yeah. I have a couple clients that I see for this exact reason. They come in and they're like, I'm in the dating world. I want to make sure that I'm the right version of me. I want to make sure that I'm not missing blind spots, that I'm showing up in the way that I need to show up. And they all say this. They all say, the communication early on is the worst, because we don't know what anybody really means, because people aren't saying what they really mean, or we're interpreting it through our wounds, or we're interpreting through our fears, or we're
unrealistic
through
expectations.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I always say, like, direct doesn't have to be rude. Direct can be kind. Kind makes anxiety less. And if we have less anxiety, we're going to show up as us. And it's like, so to me, the step one is let's be direct. Let's be honest. Let's be open. Let's share. Now we have boundaries, and we have, obviously depending on who you're sharing with, but as a society, we don't do that. We're not speaking our intentions. We're not sharing our expectations. We're not asking for things that we need. And that it kills communication and it kills connection and it kills confidence.
It sure does.
He just talked about someone who's seeking validation. You just talked about someone who's re-entering the dating world. Is there a difference between someone who is genuinely doing the work, Michelle? They've done the framework, and someone who is either not in therapy or just using therapy to explain bad behavior? We see that a lot. And I would really like to know what a person, as they're trying to become more self-aware and intentional, what does the difference look like, and what can that person look forward to by healing before they go into the next phase?
Yeah, it's powerful because everybody wants connection. It's what drives us as humans. Like we're wired for connection, we're wired for love, we're wired for people. And deep connection comes with a lot of requirements. People can't say, I want this, but then not do the work. I mean, think about that in society. Like, you can want to be a doctor, but if you don't do the work, you're never going to be a doctor. Like, if we want connection, we have to be able to be vulnerable. We have to be able to be uncomfortable. That's the big thing. If you're willing to be uncomfortable, if you're willing to take chances, if you're willing to have integrity while you do that, you're going to organically grow continually, and you're going to organically attract the people that also want that.
It is so true. And I'm trying so hard to remember who said this. I just read this yesterday, and I thought it was absolutely one of the most profound things I've ever read in my life. And it said,
Wow.
everything you want in your life is on the other side of the work you're avoiding.
Oh, that's really strong and powerful.
It's so true.
Can two people who have emotional baggage build on something healthy together? How can they do it? Do they have to be completely healed, right, before you go into something? Because every dating profile says show up healed, and I want someone healed, but we're not fully healed. So I think people feel like they need to be perfect before they go to the next phase. Can people really, really build something healthy together?
Well, I think you're never fully healed.
Right.
So if you
The end of growth is death, right?
Right. Absolutely. I'm going to be growing until I die, or I'm not doing my work. And I think it's interesting. This touches my relationship with my husband. When we started dating, I was fresh out of a 23-year marriage. And so I knew without question that I was going to be the one that had the baggage. I went in going, okay, I know I have a lot of stuff I need to understand about myself, about my history, my past. I don't want to show up, that way. So I went in with this mindset of like, I'm not healed, but I always think I'm I'm passionate about relationships. I think you can heal with someone. Now it's interesting because when I met my husband, I thought he's a lot younger than I am. He wasn't married. He'd never been married before. And we start dating seriously. And I'm like, well, I'm definitely the one that has all the baggage. I wasn't.
Right.
And I'm not saying he had a lot of baggage. I'm just saying he had baggage that he didn't know about. And so how often do people show up thinking that they're healed when they're not? And that's what's so beautiful about relationships is if we do relationship right, you want to uncover stuff.
Yes.
You want to get to the splinters because there always are going to be splinters. There are going to be new splinters. There are going to be new things. There are going to be things that, we've never spoken about before ever. But how beautiful is it to be in a relationship where someone is willing to watch you heal, willing to help you heal, willing to encourage you to heal, willing to step alongside you and isn't afraid of that work. It goes back to willingness. It goes back to transparency. It goes back to like understanding your body. But all of these things, I think, and I would even say that we are more connected because some of the healing that we both needed to do, we did together.
Yes, I agree with that completely. And it's nobody's ever a perfect. No, none of us are a completed project, right?
Yeah.
But you have to meet somebody who is in the same general area in their growth journey, right? So
Sure.
if you meet somebody that hasn't started it yet and you're
That's
way up
fair.
here in yours,
That's fair.
so you have to be kind of aligned in that way. But I cannot remember this question.
So what you're saying is there's a chance.
So what you're saying, there's a 7% chance that I will go
7%
out with you.
chance that
Yes. But for the people who are, because I've run into this and I've talked to a lot of people who have run into this, you start talking to somebody or you meet somebody and you find out that they've got a lot of stuff they need to work on. What is a way to handle that gently? I am on a mission to be, to try to give men a good name and not just, I'm like
You are.
the one person that's not going to be a jerk all the time, every time. But how do we, deal with that without trying to become their therapist and
Yeah.
without trying to be another trauma response for them? Somebody who, like you say, you get a phone number and 3 days later, if you're not texting them every 2 hours, it's they're going off the rails. Like, what's the best way to deal with that kind
Yeah,
of
it goes
thing?
back to being direct. It goes back to being honest, and it goes back to having patience to see if someone is willing.
Right.
That's the key. Is yes, you can understand like that really doesn't work for me, but you also have to communicate that to them,
Yes.
because the more you understand, the more you can make a wise decision about, okay, are we aligned enough
Mm.
to make this a go? Like, emotional intelligence is a thing, and if
Yes.
someone is willing to grow and learn in that way, then great. But also we have to discern, okay, am I willing to walk that road?
Mhm.
But I have to know what that road is. So
Yeah.
it becomes asking the hard questions. It becomes having a hard conversation about, like, okay, like early on, I have clients who've said this, they didn't text me back for 3 days.
Yeah.
I don't have time for that.
Mm.
Well, what happened is, you have an honest conversation, and what you find is, yeah, that person wasn't ready to date and they said that or whatever. But we have to be willing to ask the questions.
Mhm.
Because if we assume, we're most likely going to assume wrong.
Yes.
No, I love that. Honestly, Michelle, if someone could just take one thing away from this conversation, what would you want it to be?
I want, and this is my goal with everybody that I see. I want people to know that they matter. I want people to believe that they matter. I want them to ask themselves, who am I really, and not be afraid of that. Who am I really? And it's okay, because at the end of the day, like, every one of us has struggles, every one of us has wounds, every one of us has something going wrong inside of us. And we can't be afraid of that. And if we aren't afraid of that, we're going to show up differently inside of relationships. You shouldn't be afraid of your shadows, right?
Mm.
Get somebody that you trust to help you open that door, right? Because on the other side of that, every single time, what I have found is something that'll break your heart, not something that'll make you mad. And so we all have the tendency to hide.
Mhm.
But if collectively we turn that off and we say, as a society, let's stop hiding. I can share my stuff with you. I can be there for you in these ways. That's how people stop living behind masks, and they can create the life that they desire, because they're no longer hiding.
Mm.
Because on the other side of fear is love.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up. And Michelle, this is exactly the kind of conversation that I think our listeners will appreciate. Thank you for giving so much
you're
professional, high level advice, and just really speaking to a lot of the issues that we see. And the thing that Amber and I. The reason we started doing this is because we just meet a lot of great people, and we want to help them find each other. And
Agreed.
so Michelle Parker is a licensed professional counselor. And Michelle, tell our listeners how to get a hold of you, how to reach you if they're interested.
Yeah, so I work at Atlanta Wellness Collective. We are a therapy office that has 3 locations in Roswell, Ackworth, and Marietta. We have 31 providers at this point, and it's a group of the most incredible people ever. And we even have an in-house psychiatrist now that we service the Atlanta area, and we service it from our heart. And if you want counseling, if you want any kind of resources, we have a blog, we have a website, and you can reach out to us directly through the website. atlantawell.com is the contact. And also, if you want to get me directly, you can go to passionforpromise.com. I do a lot of workshops and intensives for couples as well.
Thank you for being here. Amber, take us home.
I love this. I think what you said as we started this is none of us are born learning how to be the perfect partner.
Yeah.
But if we're willing to turn that lens on ourselves,
Yeah.
we can figure it out.
Yeah. I
Thank
love
you
that.
so much for being with
Absolutely.
us
It was a
today.
pleasure. It was so fun. Yeah.